Voskhod 2 was a Soviet manned space mission in March 1965. The Vostok-based Voskhod 3KD spacecraft with 2 crew members on board, Pavel Belyayev and Alexey Leonov, was equipped with an inflatable airlock. It established another milestone in space exploration when Alexey Leonov became the first person to leave the spacecraft in a specialized spacesuit to conduct a 12-minute spacewalk. Crew, backup crew, reserve crew, mission parameters: mass 5,682 kilograms, apogee 475 kilometers, perigee 167 kilometers, inclination 64.8 degrees, period 90.9 minutes. Spacewalk Leonov EVA 1 March 18, 1965 8 hours 28 minutes and 13 seconds UTC. The Voskhod 2 airlock is depressurized by Leonov. 8 hours 32 minutes and 54 seconds UTC. Leonov opens the Voskhod 2 airlock hatch. 8 hours 34 minutes and 51 seconds UTC. EVA 1 start. Leonov leaves airlock. 8 hours 47 minutes and 0 seconds UTC. EVA 1 end. Leonov re-enters airlock. 8 hours 48 minutes and 40 seconds UTC. Hatch on the airlock is closed and secured by Leonov. 8 hours 51 minutes and 54 seconds UTC. Leonov begins to repressurize the airlock. Duration 12 minutes. Mission highlights: liftoff took place at 11 a.m. on the morning of the 18th of March. As with Voskhod 1, a launch abort was not possible during the first few minutes, until the payload shroud jettisoned around the 2-1/2 minute in mark. The Voskhod 3KD spacecraft had an inflatable airlock extended in orbit. Cosmonaut Alexey Leonov donned a spacesuit and left the spacecraft, while the other cosmonaut of the 2-man crew, Pavel Belyayev, remained inside. Leonov began his spacewalk 90 minutes into the mission at the end of the first orbit. Cosmonaut Leonov's spacewalk lasted 12 minutes and 9 seconds, beginning over north-central Africa and ending over eastern Siberia. The Voskhod 2 spacecraft was a Vostok spacecraft with a backup solid-fuel retro-rocket attached atop the descent module. The ejection seat was removed and 2 seats were added. An inflatable exterior airlock was also added to the descent module opposite the entry hatch. After use, the airlock was jettisoned. There was no provision for crew escape in the event of a launch or landing emergency. A solid fuel braking rocket was also added to the parachute lines to provide for a softer landing at touchdown. This was necessary because, unlike the Vostok, the crew landed with the Voskhod descent module. Though Leonov was able to complete his spacewalk successfully, both that task and the overall mission were plagued with problems. Leonov's only tasks were to attach a camera to the end of the airlock to record his spacewalk and to photograph the spacecraft. He managed to attach the camera without any problem. However, when he tried to use the still camera on his chest, the suit had ballooned and he was unable to reach down to the shutter switch on his leg. After his 12 minutes and 9 seconds outside the Voskhod, Leonov found that his suit had stiffened due to ballooning out, to the point where he could not re-enter the airlock. He was forced to bleed off some of his suit's pressure in order to be able to bend the joints, eventually going below safety limits. Leonov did not report his action on the radio to avoid alarming others, but Soviet state radio and television had earlier stopped the live broadcasts from the spacecraft when the mission experienced difficulties. The 2 crew members subsequently experienced difficulty in sealing the hatch properly due to thermal distortion caused by Leonov's lengthy troubles returning to the craft. followed by a troublesome re-entry in which malfunction of the automatic landing system forced the use of its manual backup. The spacecraft was so cramped that the two cosmonauts, both wearing spacesuits, could not return to the seats to restore the ship's center of mass for 46 seconds after orienting the ship for re-entry and a landing in Perm. The orbital module did not properly disconnect from the landing module, not unlike Vostok 1, causing the spherical return vehicle to spin wildly until the modules disconnected at 100 kilometers. The delay of 46 seconds caused the spacecraft to land 386 kilometers from the intended landing zone, in the inhospitable forests of Upper Kama upland, somewhere west of Solikamsk. Although flight controllers had no idea where the spacecraft had landed or whether Leonov and Belyayev had survived, the cosmonauts' families were told that they were resting after having been recovered. The two men were both familiar with the harsh climate and knew that bears and wolves, made aggressive by mating season, lived in the taiga. The spacecraft carried a pistol and plenty of ammunition, but the incident later drove the development of a dedicated survival gun, the TP-82. Although aircraft quickly located the cosmonauts, the area was so heavily forested that helicopters could not land. Night arrived, the temperature dropped to -5 degrees Celsius, and the spacecraft's hatch had been blown open by explosive bolts. Warm clothes and supplies were dropped and the cosmonauts spent a freezing night in the capsule Sharik in Russian. Even worse, the electrical system completely malfunctioned so that the heater would not work, but the fans ran at full blast. A rescue party arrived on skis the next day as it was too risky to try an airlift from the site. The advance party chopped wood and built a small log cabin and an enormous fire. After a more comfortable second night in the forest, the cosmonauts skied to a waiting helicopter several kilometers away and flew first to Perm, then to Baikonur for the mission debriefing. General Nikolai Kamanin's diary later gave the landing location of the Voskhod 2, about 75 kilometers from Perm in the Ural Mountains in heavy forest at 59 to 34 and 55 to 2080 on March 19, 1965 9:02 GMT. Initially there was some confusion and it was believed that Voskhod 2 landed not far from Shuchin southwest of Bereznikov north of Perm, but no indication was received from the spacecraft. Apparently a commander of one of the search helicopters reported finding Voskhod 2 on the forest road between the villages of Sorokovo and Shuchino, about 30 kilometers southwest of the town of Bereznikov. I see the red parachute and the two cosmonauts. There is deep snow all around. The capsule is currently on display at the Museum of Vk Energy in Korolev, near Moscow. Spacewalk. On reaching orbit in Voskhod 2, Leonov and Belyayev attached the EVA backpack to Leonov's It spacesuit, a modified Vostok-Sokol-1 intravehicular suit. The white metal EVA backpack provided 45 minutes of oxygen for breathing and cooling. Oxygen vented through a relief valve into space, carrying away heat, moisture, and exhaled carbon dioxide. The space suit pressure could be set at either 40.6 kilopascals or 27.40 kilopascals. Belyayev then deployed and pressurized the Volga inflatable airlock. The airlock was necessary for two reasons. First, the capsule's avionics used vacuum tubes, which required a constant atmosphere for air cooling. Also, supplies of nitrogen and oxygen sufficient to replenish the atmosphere after EVA could not be carried due to the spacecraft's weight limit. By contrast, the American Gemini capsule used solid-state avionics and an atmosphere of oxygen only, at a low pressure of 10 psi, which could easily be replenished after EVA. The Volga airlock was designed, built, and tested in 9 months in mid-1964. At launch, Volga fitted over Voskhod 2's hatch, extending 74 centimeters beyond the spacecraft's hull. The airlock comprised a 1.2 meters wide metal ring fitted over Vostok 2's inward opening hatch, a double-walled fabric airlock tube with a deployed length of 2.50 meters, and a 1.2 meters wide metal upper ring around the 65 centimeters wide inward opening airlock hatch. Volga's deployed internal volume was 2.50 cubic meters. The fabric airlock tube was made rigid by about 40 air booms, clustered as 3 independent groups. 2 groups sufficed for deployment. The air booms needed 7 minutes to fully inflate. 4 spherical tanks held sufficient oxygen to inflate the air booms and pressurize the airlock. 2 lights lit the airlock interior, and 3 16mm cameras, 2 in the airlock, 1 outside on a boom mounted to the upper ring, recorded the historic first spacewalk. Belyayev controlled the airlock from inside Voskhod 2, but a set of backup controls for Leonov was suspended on bungee cords inside the airlock. Leonov entered Volga, then Belyayev sealed Voskhod 2 behind him and depressurized the airlock. Leonov opened Volga's outer hatch and pushed out to the end of his 5.35 meters umbilicus. He later said the umbilicus gave him tight control of his movements, an observation purportedly belied by subsequent American spacewalk experience. Leonov reported looking down and seeing from the Straits of Gibraltar to the Caspian Sea. After Leonov returned to his couch, Belyayev fired pyrotechnic bolts to discard the Volga. Sergei Korolev, chief designer at OKB-1 Design Bureau, stated after the EVA that Leonov could have remained outside for much longer than he did, while M. Mstislav Keldysh, chief theoretician of the Soviet space program and president of the Soviet Academy of Sciences, said that the EVA showed that future cosmonauts would find work in space easy. The government news agency TASS reported that, outside the ship and after returning, Leonov feels well. However, post-Cold War Russian documents reveal a different story, that Leonov's Berkut spacesuit ballooned, making bending difficult. Because of this, Leonov was unable to reach the shutter switch on his thigh for his chest-mounted camera. He could not take pictures of Voskhod 2, but was he able to recover the camera mounted on Volga, which recorded his EVA for posterity, but only after it stuck and he had to exert considerable effort to push it down in front of him. After 12 minutes walking in space, Leonov re-entered Volga. Recent accounts report cosmonaut Leonov violated procedure by entering the airlock head first, then became stuck sideways when he turned to close the outer hatch, forcing him to flirt with decompression sickness by lowering the suit pressure so he could bend to free himself. Recently, Leonov said that he had a suicide pill to swallow had he been unable to re-enter the Voskhod 2, and Belyayev been forced to abandon him in orbit. Doctors reported that Leonov nearly suffered heat stroke. His core body temperature increased by 1.8 degrees Celsius in 20 minutes. Leonov said he was up to his knees in sweat, which sloshed in the suit. In an interview published in the Soviet Military Review in 1980, Leonov downplayed his difficulties, saying that building manned orbital stations and exploring the universe are inseparably linked with man's activity in open space. There is no end of work in this field. In popular culture, part of the Voskhod 2 spacecraft is seen in the UFO episode Conflict as a relic before its destruction by a powerful bomb.